Hi, welcome to Christine's Corner. I'm Christine. As you see, I'm in this funny little getup because I'm going to be reading some old Christmas stories. I have to read them, they're old stories because we can only read from public domain stories. And I need to tell you that the story that I'm going to read you is on a website, the Project Gutenberg ebook, Some Christmas Stories by Charles Dickens. And the story I'm going to read to you is A Christmas Tree. There's several, they're short stories. So A Christmas Tree, 1850. That's a really long time ago. I have been looking on this evening at a merry company of children assembled around that pretty German toy, a Christmas tree. The tree was planted in the middle of a great round table and towered high above their heads. It was brilliantly lighted by a multitude of little tapers. Sorry for all the rumbling of the page turning. And everywhere sparkled and glittered with bright objects. There were rosy-cheeked dolls hiding behind the green leaves, and there were real watches with movable hands at least, and an endless capacity of being wound up, dangling from innumerable twigs. There were French polished tables, chairs, bedsteads, wardrobes, 80-day clocks, and various other articles of domestic furniture, wonderfully made in tin at Wolverhampton. That must have been very popular in those days. Perched among the boughs, as if in preparation for some fairy housekeeping, there were jolly, broad-faced little men, much more agreeable in appearance than many real men, and no wonder, for their heads took off and showed them to be fully of sugar plums. There were fiddles and drums, there were tambourines, books, work boxes, painted boxes, sweetmeat boxes, peep show boxes, and all kinds of boxes. There were trinkets for the elder girls, far brighter than any grown-up gold and jewels. There were baskets and pincushions and all devices. There were guns, swords, and banners. There were witches standing in enchanted rings of pasteboard to tell fortunes. There were teetotums, humming tops, needle cases, pen wipers. Wow! Smelling bottles, conversation cards, bouquet holders, real fruit made artificially dazzling with gold leaf, imitation apples, pears, and walnuts crammed with surprises. Wow! In short, as a pretty child before me delightedly whispered to another pretty child, her bosom friend, there was everything and more. This motley collection of odd objects clustering on the tree like magic fruit and flashing back to the bright looks directed towards it from every side, some of the diamond eyes admiring it was hardly on a level with the table, and a few were languishing in timid wonder on the bosoms of pretty mothers, aunts, and nurses, made a lively realization of the fantasies of childhood, and set me thinking how all the trees that grow and all the things that come into existence on the earth have their wild adornments at that well-remembered time. Being now at home again and alone, the only person in the house awake, my thoughts are drawn back by a fascination which I do not care to resist, to my own childhood. I begin to consider, what do we all remember best upon the branches of the Christmas tree of our own young Christmas days, by which we climb to real life? Straight in the middle of the room, cramped in the freedom of its growth by no encircling walls or soon reaching ceiling, a shadowy tree arises, and looking upon into the dreamy brightness of its top, for I observe in this tree the singular property that it appears to grow downwards towards the earth. I look into my youngest Christmas recollections. All toys at first, I find, up yonder, up among the green holly and red berries, is the tumbler with his hands in his pockets, who wouldn't lie down, but whenever he was put upon the floor, persisted in rolling his fat body about until he rolled himself still and brought those lobster eyes of his to bear upon me, when I affected to laugh very much, but in my heart of hearts was extremely doubtful of him. We know who he's talking about, right? Close behind him is that infernal snuff box, out of which there sprang a demoniacal consular in a black gown, with an obnoxious head of hair and a red cloth mouth, wide open, who was not to be endured on any terms, but could not be put away either, for he used suddenly, in a highly magnified state, to fly out of mammoth snuff boxes in dreams, when least expected. Nor is the frog with the cobbler's wax on his tail far off, for there was no knowing where he wouldn't jump. And when he flew over the candle, and upon one's hand with that spotted back red on a green ground, he was horrible. The cardboard lady in a blue silk skirt, who was stood up against the candlestick to dance, and whom I see on the same branch, was milder and was beautiful, but I can't say as much for the large cardboard man, who used to be hung against the wall and pulled by a string. There was a sinister expression in that nose of his, and when he got his legs around his neck, which he often did, he was ghastly and not a creature to be alone with. When did that dreadful mask first look at me? Who put it on, and why was I so frightened that the sight of it is an error in my life? It is not a hideous visage in itself. It is even meant to be droll. Why then, where its solid features so intolerable? Surely not because it hid the wearer's space. An apron would have done as much. And though I should have preferred even the apron away, it would not have been absolutely insupportable, like the mask. Was it the immovable of the mask? The doll's face was immovable, but I was not afraid of her. Perhaps that fixed and set change coming over a real face infused into my quickened heart some remote suggestion and dread of the universal change that is to come on every face, and make it still. Nothing reconciled me to it. No drummers from whom proceeded a melancholy chirping on the turning of the handle. No regiment of soldiers with a mute band, taken out of a box and fitted one by one upon a stiff and lazy little set of lazy tongues. No old woman, made of wires and a brown paper composition, cutting up a pie for 2 small children, could give me a permanent comfort for a long time. Nor was it any satisfaction to be shown the mask and see that it was made of paper, or to have it locked up and be assured that no one wore it. The mere recollection of that fixed face, the mere knowledge of its existence anywhere, was sufficient to awake me in the night all perspiration and horror with, "Oh, I know it's coming. Oh, the mask." I never wondered what the dear old donkey with the pain ears, there he is, was made of then. His hat was real to the touch, I recollect, and the great black horse with the round red spots all over him, the horse that I could even get upon. I never wondered what had brought him to that strange condition. or thought that such a horse was not commonly seen at a Newmarket. The 4 horses of no color next to him that went into the wagon of cheeses and could be taken out and stabled under the piano appeared to have bits of fur tippet for their tails and other bits for their manes, and to stand upon pegs instead of legs, but it was not so when they were brought home for a Christmas present. They were all right then. Neither was their harness unceremoniously nailed into their chest, as appears to be the case now. The tinkling works of the music cart, I did find out, to be made of quill, toothpicks, and wire, and I always thought that little tumbler in his shirt sleeves, perpetually swarming up one side of a wooden frame and coming down, head foremost, on the other. Rather a weak-minded person, thought good-natured, but the Jacob's ladder next him, made of little squares of red wood that went flapping and clattering over one another, each developing a different picture, and the whole enlivened by small bells, was a mighty marvel with a great delight. Ah, the doll-house, of which I was not proprietor, but where I visited. I don't admire the House of Parliament half so much as that stone-fronted mansion with the real glass windows, and the doorsteps, and a real balcony greener that I ever see now, except at watering places, and even they afford but a poor limitation. And though it did open all at once, the entire house front, which was a blow, I admit, as canceling the fiction of a staircase, it was but to shut it up again, and I could believe. Even open, there were 3 distinct rooms in it, a sitting room, a bedroom, elegantly furnished, and best of all, a kitchen with uncommonly soft, fair irons, a plentiful assortment of diminutive utensils, the warming pan, and a tin man, cook in profile, who was always going to fry 2 fish. What Barmecide justice have I done to the noble feast wherein the set of wooden platters figured, each with its own peculiar delicacy, as a ham or turkey glued tight on to it, and garnished with something green, which I recollect as moss. Could all the temperance societies of these later days united give me such a tea-drinking as I have had through the means of yonder little set of blue crockery, which really would hold liquid? It ran out of the small wooden cask, I recollect, and tasted of matches, and which made tea, nectar, and if the 2 legs of the ineffectual little sugar tongs did tumble over one another and want purpose, little Punch's hand, what does it matter? And if I did once shriek out as a poisoned child and strike the fashionable company with conservative by reason of having drunk a little teaspoon inadvertently dissolved in 2 hot tea, I was never the worse for it, except by a powder. Upon the next branches of the tree, lower down, hard by the green waller and miniature gardening tools, how thick the books began to hang. Thin books in themselves at first, but many of them, and with delicately smooth covers of bright red or green. What fat black letters to begin with. It was an archer and shot at a frog. Of course he was. He was an apple pie also, and there he is. He was a good many things in his time, and so were most of his friends, except X, who had so little versatility that I never knew him to get beyond X's or Ximtp, like Y, who was always confined to a yacht or a yew tree, and Z, condemned forever to be a zebra or a zany. But now the very tree itself changes and becomes a beanstalk, the marvelous beanstalk with which Jack climbed to the giant's house. And now those dreadfully interesting double-headed giants, with their clubs over their shoulders, begin to stride along the boughs in a perfect throng, dragging knights and ladies home for dinner by the hair of their heads. And Jack, how noble, with his sword of sharpness and his shoes of swiftness. Again, those old meditations come upon me as I gaze upon him. And I debate within myself whether there was more than one Jack, which I am loath to believe possible, or only one genuine, original Admiral Jack who achieved all the recorded exploits. I need to take a little sip. It's getting longer. Thank you. Good for Christmas time is the ruddy color of the cloak, in which the tree making a forest of itself for her to trip through. With her basket, Little Red Riding Hood comes to me on one Christmas Eve to give me information of the cruelty and treachery of that dissembling wolf who ate her grandmother without making any impression on his appetite, and then ate her after making that ferocious joke about his teeth. She was my first love. I felt that if I could have married Little Red Riding Hood, I should have known perfect bliss. But it was not to be, and there was nothing for it but to look out the wolf in the Noah's Ark there, and put him late in the procession on the table, as a monster who was to be degraded. Oh, the wonderful Noah's Ark! It was not found seaworthy when put in a washing tub, and the animals were crammed in at the roof, and needed to have their legs well shaken down before they could be got in. Even there and then, 10 to 1, but they began to tumble out the door, which was but imperfectly fastened with a wire latch. But was that against it? Consider the noble fly, a size or two smaller than the elephant, the ladybird, the butterfly, all trumpets of art. Consider the goose, whose feet were so small, whose balance was so indifferent. Then he usually tumbled forward and knocked down all the animal creation. Consider Noah and his family, like idiotic tobacco stoppers, and how the leopard stuck to warm little fingers, and how the tails of the larger animals used gradually to resolve themselves into fray bits of string. Hush! Again, a forest, and somebody up in a tree. Not Robin Hood, not Valentine, not the yellow dwarf. I have passed him in all Mother's bunches wonders without mention. But an Eastern king with a glittering scimitar and turban. By Allah, the Eastern kings, for I see another, looking over his shoulder. Down upon the grass, at the tree's foot, lies the full length of a coal-black giant, stretched asleep, with his head in a lady's lap, and near them is a glass box, fastened with 4 locks of shining steel, in which he keeps the lady prisoner when he is awake. I see the 4 keys at his girdle now. The lady makes signs to the 2 kings in the tree, who softly descend. It is a setting in of the bright Arabian Nights. Oh, now all common things become uncommon and enchanted to me. All lamps are wonderful, all rings are talisman. Common flower pots are full of treasure. With a little earth scattered on the top. Trees are for Alibaba to hide in. Beefsteaks are to throw down into the valley of diamonds, that the precious stones may stick to them and be carried by the eagles to their nests, whence the traders with loud cries, not going to make it, will scare them. Tarts are made according to the recipe of the vizier's son of Bussorah, who turned pastry cook after he was set down in his drawers at the gate of Damascus. Cobblers are all metaphys and in the habit of sewing up people cut into 4 pieces, to whom they are taken blindfolded. Any iron ring let into stone is the entrance to a cave which only waits for the magician. And the little fire and the necromancy, they will make the earth shake. All the dates imported come from the same tree as the unlucky date, with whom shall the merchant knock out the eye of the genie's invisible son. Oh my. All olives are out of stock of that fresh fruit, concerning which the commander of the faithful overheard the boy conduct the fictitious trail of the fraudulently olive merchant. All apples are akin to the apple purchased, with 2 others, from the Sultan's gardener for 3 sequins, and which the tall black slave stole from the child. All dogs are associated with the dog, really a transformed man, who jumped upon the baker's counter and put his paw on the piece of bad money. All rice recalls the rice with the awful lady who was a ghoul, could only peck by grains because of her nightly feast in the burial place. My very rocking horse, there he is, with his nostrils turned completely inside out, indicative of, should have a peg in his, but virtue thereof to fly away with me, as the wooden horse did with the Prince of Persia in the sight of all his father's court. Yes, on every object that I recognize among these upper branches of my Christmas tree, I see this fairy light. When I wake in bed at daybreak on the cold, dark winter mornings, the white snow dimly beheld outside through the frost on the window pane, I hear Dinazade, "Sister, sister, if you are yet awake, I pray you finish the history of the young king of the Black Islands." He replies, "If my lord the Sultan will suffer me to live another day, sister, I will not only finish that, but tell you more wonderful story yet." Then the gracious Sultan goes out, giving no orders for the execution, and we all 3 breathe again. I only have like 2 minutes, so I have to read the end of this story, which seems to be longer than I expected. I think I have 2 minutes left. So I am going to read the end. I'm sorry. You can go on Gutenberg.org and you can read what I haven't read to you yet. Legion is the name of the German castles where we sat, alone to wait for the spectre where we are shown into a room. Now, among the later toys and fancies hanging there, as idle often and less pure by the images once associated with the sweet old waits, the softened music in the night, ever unalterable, encircled by the social thoughts of Christmas time. Still, let the benignant figure of my childhood stand unchanged. In every cheerful image and suggestion that the season brings, may the bright star that rested above the poor roof be the star of all the Christian world. A moment's pause, O vanishing tree, of which the lower boughs are dark to me as yet, and let me look once more. I know there are blank spaces on thy tree, where eyes that I have loved have shone and smiled, from which they are departed. But far above, I see the razor of the dead girl and the widow's son, and God is good. If age be hiding for me in the unseen portion of thy downward growth, oh, may I, with a gray head, turn a child's heart to that figure yet, in a child's trustfulness and confidence. Now the tree is decorated with bright merriment and song and dance and cheerfulness, and they are welcome, innocent and welcome be they ever held, beneath the branches of the Christmas tree, which casts no gloomy shadow. But as it sinks into the ground, I hear a whisper going through the leaves. This, in commemoration of the law of love and kindness, mercy and compassion. This in remembrance of me. So that's the short, long of the Christmas tree. Again, if you want to read it, go to www.gutenberg.org under children's stories. Thank you for tuning in to Christine's Corner. It was a pleasure reading to you, and be reading to you someday soon. Have a great Christmas holiday. I'm sorry, everyone calls it a different name, which is perfectly fine. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again. Christine's Corner. Christine's Corner. Stay and watch the show. You'll feed your heart and soul. Meeting people in the know. Christine's Corner. Christine.